In our fight for civil equality, the queer and trans community has positively transformed society at large, starting important cultural conversations around things like sexuality, diverse relationship models, harm reduction, health equity, collective care, gender norms, and more. Hi, I'm Zeph, a Chicano illustrator from Southern California and an Aquarian, and you are listening to QT Life with Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance. Hey everyone, this is Zeph, and you are watching QT Life with Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance. Today, I am in the beautiful Riverside Main Library in downtown Riverside, and I am here with Denise Silva. Denise is an artist of Indigenous descent and a storyteller from Southern California who uses art not only as a means of displaying beauty in the world, but also as a means for spiritual healing and transmitting messages from the spiritual world. Denise has played a big role recently in the emergence of the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art and Culture, also here in Riverside, emerging as a cultural hub in the region, especially because the Cheech represents the only museum of its kind in that it's the only museum that's dedicated specifically to Chicano art. And so I want to talk to Denise today about that involvement, but also about her work in general. And we'll get to it, but Denise is curating an exhibit at the Cheech, which is going from now all the way up until mid-February. We'll talk about it in a minute, but with that being said, Denise, welcome to QT Life.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I think we should start with that then, with the Cheech.
Mhm.
So when the Cheech first opened, it was significant for me as a Chicano person because you see Chicano art, in different formats and different contexts, but never was there a museum that's dedicated to the art form, which is very, very unique to the culture, right?
Very, yeah.
The Before we get into the exhibit that you're curating, tell me about that significance for you when the Cheech opened. When you heard about it, what feelings came up for you?
Oh my gosh, so many feelings. I heard that the Cheech was in the works back in like 2017. They had a large show at Riverside Art Museum, RAM, in 2017, and for his Chicanitas book, and it was for the art walk. And I took my family. We went, just being so excited. Being a huge fan of Cheech over the years. I mean, as a little kid, my dad was super into Cheech and Chong movies, and probably not the most appropriate content for little kids to watch. So I've been a fan of Cheech for years. And then also going to college and studying in my Chicano studies class, learning about his huge collection that he had been just acquiring over the years. And that just kind of flipped this little switch in my brain, like, wow, like there's someone that values this work, and it just really stuck with me, and I followed his acquisitions and his career for years. So coming from that space of being like a fan, and being a follower of just his collection and all the artists who I was just a huge fan of. I had so many like Chicana heroes, so many women femme artists that were in his collection, and that meant a lot to me. Like, here is this collection, and this man is acquiring women artists, femme artists, which you don't really hear too much of. So that, to me, that just really sparked like an interest in my heart for sure. So finding out that he was going to potentially have a museum here, I just thought, wow, how can I be a part of that? In what way? At that time, I had just started really getting back into my art, and I had contemplated going back to college and getting my master's in Chicano studies. I was like, how can I be a part of this museum? Because in my mind, I didn't even think about the art thing. I was thinking Chicano studies, that angle. But life happened, I went through some things in my life, did not get to go back to college, but I was focusing on my art and not really thinking that that was gonna get me in the door. So It's very significant for me in that way because I think I really was in that time that I found out that the museum was going to be here in Riverside, which is my hood. I mean, I live 3 miles away, from the museum. I just thought, wow, this can mean so many amazing things for me. And I just really focused on the art and kind of prepared myself in that way. So, if the museum opens and they're open to artists, local artists, like I'll be prepared and ready because I'll have like a body of work to show for. And what's interesting is curating the show at the Cheech recently. They let me in the back door one day. I was like delivering some of the artist's work, and I thought, wow, they just let me in the back door, And I got here, and it's just like the lot of full circle moments for sure.
Sounds like a symbolic moment.
Very much so. Yes.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Mhm.
I want to get into Indigenous futurism, but you touched on this, so I want to kind of just talk about it a little bit
Mhm.
about the presence of women and femme people in Chicano art.
Mm.
One of the cool things about Chicano art, and one of the things that sets it apart from, say, Mexican art, from Mexican nationals,
Mhm.
is the history. And one thing that I've noticed, I have family here and I have family in Mexico.
Mhm.
And one thing that I've noticed that, just as an example, I have a cousin who's very into abstract art. There's a big abstract art movement in Mexico. A lot of forward-looking, a lot of moments in Mexican history that are kind of looking to Europe, looking to kind of cast off ideas around being native in Mexico and looking to be something else, something distinct. Not everybody, but that does happen in Mexico.
Mhm.
Whereas in the US, a lot of Chicanos, myself included, there's this sense of wanting to maintain contact with Mexico, say, or
Mhm.
the sense of Latinidad
Mhm.
in Latin America. But at the same time, we're from here. And so we look to our past and to our ancestry and
Mhm.
evoke a lot of this indigeneity, a lot of pre-Hispanic motifs in our art and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And something that emerges from that is the centering and the valuing of matriarchy and of women in general. I wonder
Yes.
if that's something that you've thought about.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, I identify as Chicana myself. My family is from the Southwest, um, New Mexico, LA, East LA. It was really challenging I don't really identify with a lot of, gosh, Mexican traditions. And I know a lot of people go back and they have family that they can trace back to Mexico. And I can too, but it's like several generations back. So my family has been here, I want to say about four. I'm like maybe the fourth generation that's here,
Mm.
in the Southwest, in northern part of the Americas. And like, the Chicano identity is something that just I fit in so comfortably, and that's just something that I've always that space, that's when I see things in the Cheech, when I see a lot of the work and the Chicano artwork, I saw so much of myself, I saw so much of my family, so many family customs that were not as easy to identify if I say, "Well, I'm Mexican American," so that's always been like this weird space to be in. So to go to see the work in Cheech's collection and the things that are in the building just feels so very much at home, very like familiar. And it's a good feeling.
So the exhibit that you're curating at the Cheech
Mhm.
is called Indigenous Futurism. When I hear that term, immediately I start thinking about things and concepts and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But I want to hear from you, like, tell us about Indigenous Futurism.
Well, I feel like I have been in my own personal art practice, like playing around with this idea of indigenous futurism, and exploring like these themes. I like to call them, and I saw this term on Instagram, and it just like it blew my mind. And it was referring to our ancient technologies and how we employ these ancient technologies for our collective liberation. And some of those technologies were literally just taking it back to old ways that our ancestors used to practices, meeting in circles, following the moon cycles, sacred sexuality, the acceptance of not just the binary of like, a man, a woman, but two spirit, two spirit people. Also, just natural birthing, like taking back our birth spaces, rematriation, coming back to the land. Like there were so many things that were kind of reflecting back to my own personal spiritual journey. And I was just like, wow, these are all things that I'm learning about and that feel so real to me and have healed me in so many ways. And I had this group of artists that I've shown with for like several years, and they were also using these themes in their work. And so when I thought about Indigenous futurism, to me, it's like for us to go to reimagine our Indigenous futures, it's like we have to go back and adopt a lot of these ways to ground ourselves, to make ourselves balanced as human beings. And so I think of having an all femme show is strengthening the sacred feminine's influence on the earth because I mean, just read the headlines right now, So I feel like this is so timely that, when you have a chance to see the show, and you'll see each artist piece and their statements that are by their pieces, and I was just like, wow, the way that everything just lined up, but again, it's just taking us back to our like back home, our journey back home, back to the land, back to the plants, um, back to ourselves. That was the inspiration, and I really feel like it was very much a channeled message, from my guides, being in, like, deep meditation, and, it just the way it just came out, it couldn't be just for me, That is definitely divinely inspired.
I wanted to talk about that as well, actually,
Mhm,
because your art is transmitting a lot of spiritual messages and
mhm,
the way that relates to ideas around Indigenous futurism. And so I wanted to start by talking about how ideas around indigeneity also depend on the cultural lens through which you're viewing or
mhm,
conceiving of what it means to be indigenous. So in the United States, through this Anglo Protestant lens, that ideas around indigeneity are seen as, are you a member of a tribal group?
yeah.
Is that group federally recognized? That kind of a thing. So that's one view, right? It's not right or wrong. It just
And
is what it
that's
is.
so challenging and so limiting, and that is why a big thing for me in hanging the work and, the label that has all the art information underneath our names is how each artist identifies.
Mm,
So if they consider themselves Chicana, Chicanx, there's Mexica, there was Hopi, there's
mm,
Mescalero Apache, everyone put like their heritage, and I thought that was so important. And I don't think anyone in the show is like in like a recognized tribe, but that we're all trying to rediscover and get back to our roots and things. And I've had people ask like, well, how do you know that you're Hopi or you're a Mescalero Apache, beyond like my family telling me and doing study, and trying to do the whole family tree thing. I like to say, and me and my best friend, Amparo Sacred Art, we always say this term to each other. It's like whatever makes our heart sing, or
mm.
like our blood sing. That's what it is. Whatever makes our blood sing, and certain things really catch my attention and my heart and my in the heart space, and I go toward those things, and I know that those are my ancestors, right? It's not something that can be, well, like the blood quantum thing, like, well, how much, indigenous are you? And I don't subscribe to that. It's just it's whatever is making my blood sing, and also those family stories
Mm,
that are so important. Your heritage, where you come from.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, because that view is very culturally defined, right? Whereas, like in Latin America, there's ideas around indigeneity, or if you're a member of like an ethnic minority, ideas around traditional ways of life, of speaking an indigenous language, say. But for example, in Mexico, using that
Mhm.
example, 90% of people are mestizo or consider themselves mestizo. So
Mhm.
these are people of indigenous descent who have become integrated into a mainstream culture or into like this mestizo culture.
Mhm.
So that's another cultural lens through which to view indigeneity. What I'm interested in as it relates to your work is there's this other element there, which is viewing and understanding your own indigeneity through the lens of the spiritual contact that you've created with your what seems like your inner life and also your ancestors and messages coming through and using that intuition and those messages to inform your art and to inform your understanding of what it says
Mhm.
about the world and about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I had this like crazy spiritual like breakthrough, and I am a really dedicated journaler and have these journals. And I was just like, wow, I'm going through, in this journal I'm writing, I'm going through so many spiritual awakenings, and there's so many things that I'm learning and I'm feeling. And I just wish like I could like share those things,
Mm.
or, maybe someone else has felt the same or is having the same kind of awakenings. And it was just really simple. I was like, I can do that. I can do that with my art. Like the art can start sharing those messages. Like I don't have to be very specific on what it means, but like I'm like infusing those meanings and the messages into the art, like the energy and with my intention. And if it touches a person and they like, hey, I that resonates, or I feel the same way, or it's for whatever reason this is really touching me, like then that's.
It says something.
Yes, definitely.
So speaking of the messages, I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. There's a
Mhm,
lot to talk about, but maybe we could just touch on. Okay, two ideas come to mind. One is this
mhm,
idea of three, and the other is this idea of four. But I just want to touch on this idea of three.
mhm,
So when you're talking about indigenous futurism, there's three elements that come to mind for me. Which one is the past, evoke the evocation of the past.
mhm,
Two is the present, which is what you're doing with your life and your work, that kind of a thing. And then three is this forward looking element, which is saying, okay, rematriation, we're looking away from a moment in time that was these like oppressive colonial ways of treating
mhm.
people and of seeing the world very patriarchal. Seems stale, seems like it's not working anymore. We're moving away from that.
Yeah.
So past, present, future. Talk to me about this past, present, future in the exhibit and also in your own work.
I think in my personal work, it's very much tapping into those three elements of being a femme, which is the inner child, um, like the maiden and the mother, and then also the crone. So me being a femme and having the experience of being in those three spaces, like that really like informed my work when I first started. Like um it was such a powerful thing to have the ability to tap into my inner child and just kind of have a better understanding of who I am now, and like how all of those things like just shaped me, and to have the power to create work that features like my inner child and almost leaving breadcrumbs for her.
Mm,
It's very much like that whole like quantum field where the past is happening, the future, everything is all intertwined. So I think like whatever I do now like helps the inner child, but also she's helping me to get to this place. It's like this whole mind blowing thing, but it's wild when I think about it that wow, like the love that I give the inner child, she's giving me the love and the courage to do the things that I'm doing now. Um, And then also in that space of the maiden and the mother, I'm a mother. I have 6 children, and, I learned a lot and got so many of my own, like, natural birthrights back, and they're intact because I had a lot of birth ceremony. I mean, going through um the voyage of childbirth is it's wild. And so that really has informed my work as well. And now settling into my crone phase. And I mean, a lot of people
Uh,
think that I'm a lot younger than I am, but I'm definitely into my crone phase, and I'm loving it because it's giving me so much power, and also just I can curse, right? I mean, I don't give any shits at all about, people's approval or any kind of judgments or, taking advice. "Well, I think you should be doing this. Are you sure, you really wanna call it indigenous futurism?" Like, that's gonna be, like, very controversial. And I'm just like, "No." Like, I feel very, very firm in this space and very, like, standing on my square, and I know that's because of, like, the crone has really given me that, like, strength, I guess you could say. Excuse me.
I love the way that this big picture idea of like indigenous futurism in general, and as an idea of like uh, changing the world,
Mhm.
helping in this transition from a patriarchal world to a more egalitarian or matriarchal world,
Mhm.
is involving these ideas of past, present, and future. I love how that idea is also reflected in the individual, right? So like this idea that our child, our present self as an adult,
Mhm.
and then the person that we will become in old age, it's all part of this continuum that exists, that already exists all together, and all
Yeah.
these stages are informing each other
And you don't
simultaneously.
really realize how harmful all of these systems are, these patriarchal systems, until you like really sit back and you take account for just everything. And so for me, like stepping away from those harmful systems and decolonizing, I don't know how I feel about that word. Like, it's kind of, I don't know, but that's basically, what we're doing is
Yeah,
like stepping away from those harmful systems. But then also, then there was like this space, like, okay, we step away. If I step away from those systems, what else is there? Like, because that's the only way that we have known, right? So I think going back and learning about all of these, learning about curanderismo, learning more about herbs, learning about the moon cycles, um, all the goddesses and the female deities and things like that. Like that was like my education that was filling taking up that space where I thought like there's no other way. How are we going to exist without these systems? And I'm like, wait, hold on. There's a lot of ways that we're gonna exist because we have to go back and that's what those ancient technologies are doing.
totally. Yeah, so I mean, and if you're looking at Mesoamerican art, the writing system wasn't at the level that European writing systems were at, or even,
Mhm.
Chinese, for example. But the symbolism itself and the imagery does transmit concepts and ideas. And so that's something that I found really interesting in looking at Mesoamerican art, is that these images are symbols that transmit messages.
Mhm.
And the value in that is that we can use those messages to inform the life that we live today, in
Yeah.
the same way that the people who made those symbols let it
Yeah.
inform their life at the time.
I think of that all the time, like where, you know, 50, 100 years down the line, what is gonna become of my art? Are people still going to be looking at it? Like, how are they going to interpret it? I think of that all the time, And I just think that that's just, like, I'm taking my place in line with all of those artists, all those indigenous people that were like, that was their gift, and this is my gift too. So, yeah, I think that always gives me like you know,
Yeah.
a little tingle, like excitement, like um this is just my place, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're talking about, the continuum of history, yes, there's in the individual, the child, the adult, and then the elder.
Hmm.
But in that same sense, or if you run with that idea, it's also part of a continuum that runs back all the way to the beginning of a person's lineage and also
Yes.
runs into the future, to the future generations.
And I mean, I study a lot of matrilineal concepts too. And I think that also stepping into that crone phase, um, everything just a lot has aligned so perfectly. And I think this was just really meant to be. Like this is the time and the space to have like a show like Indigenous Futurism. Because I tell you, I have been working, I always say like I've been on brand like forever.
Yeah.
And I've been working with these themes since I was like 17, 18 years old. But at that time, they just didn't make no sense. And I would always be like super shy about, what I was making and not really wanting to show a lot of people because I would get teased, by the nudity and breasts and, oh, you're just constantly working on women and women's bodies and or babies and things like that. And it just I don't know where I was driven so much to create this work, but not really having like an understanding. I was like, why can't I just be like a normal artist like other people and do landscapes or something? I would always come back to this and not understand why. And it's taken all these years for me to understand like, okay, like that was like my true essence, like popping out for a little bit and like kind of checking the temperature of the room, of society, of our culture. And it just was not that time yet. Then I would like kind of go back into hiding and I became a mom and did all the things. And um then it kind of popped out again, like checking the temperature of the world and this the culture. And I feel like, okay, it's like this is like my guides and my ancestors were like, no, like this is the time now. And I think that's the place that I just have so much like drive and also I don't want to say confidence, but just like a peace about bringing these concepts forward and just feeling very timely, and that's a good feeling, that it's like the time, like now is the time after so many years of not knowing and not being understood and not being valued. That's another thing, having the work there and feeling valued by the museum and everyone else that was helping to get this show going is feeling like they really do value our voices and our work, all of us, the artists in the show. Yeah.
So, speaking of which, this is
Mhm,
a curated exhibit.
mhm.
There are multiple artists that are participating for, if I'm not
There's 18 artists
18. Okay,
actually.
18.
18 all femme artists.
Hmm.
And we also have a two-spirit artist and I believe a few non-binary artists. And that was really important to me too, to have the lens be from an all femme group of artists.
Mm.
Being in the art field and experiencing a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of just not the best treatment by by men. And I had the experience of working in an all-women collective like back in 2018, 2019 here in Riverside. And that just kind of like gave me a taste for what it's like to be creating and showing in like a safe space and everyone kind of like getting the content and what I was trying to like put out there. And so I knew when it was time to have a show like this, I would want to have like an all femme group of artists. And so yeah, there's 18 of us.
Amazing.
Hmm.
And what are some other themes that the artists have touched on that you found impactful or that
Oh,
touched you in a way where you're like, this needs to go in this show?
I like I said before, I have worked with a lot of these artists for several years. So I knew whatever they were going to create was going to be amazing. They're already kind of working in that energy and that indigenous futurism energy. So when I saw a lot of the works for the first time, when they were dropping off their work, I was just like, just floored by first of all how beautiful they are and also just how powerful each piece was. There is one that comes to mind by Sarah Vasquez, and it's a lino cut. So it's the only black and white work in the show, but it's so powerful. It's titled Rage, and it's like a woman, and she's kind of like screaming. And it just, I'm just like, wow, when you see it, you feel it. It's very much that sacred feminine rage. So that's super powerful. There's also a really large Venus deity that she's just, it looks like she's almost like a neon sign. She's glowing. And I just feel like the presence, knowing that it's a feminine deity and that she's there kind of like watching over all of us. There are other beautiful ones. There is another piece by Amparo Chi, Grow From Within, and it's like a beautiful earth mother. She's like rooted, she's like a tree, and she has like a little corn stalk, and it's like a little child inside of it. And it just looks, it's so beautiful and it's so tender. And I think that's what gets me for a lot of the pieces are very powerful, but also very tender. There's another piece by Melanie Cervantes, and it's Indigenous women defending life and land from the beginning of time.
Mm.
And it's like a little viejita, you know, and you can tell, and she has her braids, and she has a corn stalk in one hand, but over her shoulder she also has she has like a weapon, you
Mm.
know. And I love that 'cause it's just like fuck around and find out kind of
Yeah.
energy where like, yes, we're all like femmes, we're all women, mothers, some of us are mothers, some are not. But like the energy is like we're defending what is sacred and by, you know, any means necessary for sure.
You know, speaking of the what's the term that you used? The technology, like art as a
Our
ancient
yeah.
technology. As you're speaking, it reminds me of a symbolism of the Tlaltecutli. And so this is the primordial Earth Mother because the Earth
Mhm.
Mother has many aspects, right?
Yeah.
She expresses herself in a variety of ways.
Mhm.
And Tlaltecutli is the primordial mother,
Mhm.
and she's inherently filled with rage, and it's but it's a
Is
power.
she the eater of filth?
No,
No.
but
Okay.
similar
Okay.
in that it's this idea that some of the literature talks about her in terms of the terrible mother,
Mhm.
and when you're talking about technology, which I love that you bring that up, is that there's a scientific symbolism there. So the earth is formed and it's this inhospitable place, right? Just lava, no oceans, no land, right?
Mhm.
It's just the earth in its rawest form.
Yeah.
That's Tlaltecutli. And then over time, oceans and land start to form, and then the earth becomes benevolent and starts to give of itself and
Mhm.
doesn't ever ask of her children to give back. And no matter how poorly they treat her, she will always give to them, and that's us today.
Mhm.
But the symbolism of Tlaltecutli is to remind us like there's a power behind that benevolence, and you need
Yes.
keep it in mind.
It's definitely that. It's like the dark mother, you know? It's like there's the beautiful nurturing space of the mother, and then there's also like the dark destructive one too. And it's that duality. You can't have one without the other. And I feel like, yeah, we've been sitting in the place that the church has put us, like benevolent, nurturing, you know, very much like the bead hen. But then there's also the other aspects, and those are necessary too. So I think I've gotten comfortable getting more into that space myself. And that's that fuck around and find out energy, and also having the boldness to like make something like this happen. Like if I were going to wait for someone to like invite me to do it, or, you know, or like, I didn't really go around and ask anybody, "What do you think about this idea?" I was just like, "No, I'm doing it." Like, who's gonna stop me? Like, if I don't do it here, I'll do it somewhere else. I'll make it happen with my community, whatever. But I just felt like that strongly, like this energy has to come out now, you know? And of course in the form of art because that's what I do. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have the backing anyway of spiritual guides, and it's something that comes through in your work. You can tell that there's that support there.
I have a piece in the show. I have 2 pieces in the show, and one of them is called Inner Spaces, and it's kind of like a play. Like, I had a solo show in downtown Riverside in January of 2022, and the show was called Inner Spaces, and it's just really about those inner spaces. So the piece in the Cheech right now is like a woman, and she has a hand, and the hand has an eye. Her eyes are closed, but she has the eye in her hand, and it's like a ray is coming out. And it's just about following those, your inner voice, your intuition, your guides, your ancestors. And that was really important to me to have in the show because if I had not followed the guide, my inner knowing, then the show would not even be there. It would not even be taking place. So,
So, just to remind everybody, this show is
mhm.
happening currently and it's going on through
Yes.
February 18th of 2024.
So yeah, it just opened on October 14th and it's open to the public now.
And I want to mention as well, Denise on Instagram is the handle Paramama. So, para like the
Paramama?
fruit,
Yes.
mama. And you do artist talks on Fridays.
I do. I mean, I haven't been as consistent because I've been so busy doing this. And at first I was like super consistent, like every Friday I'm gonna have an artist. But then I thought it has to be more organic, like people that I really want to talk to. And so it's not consistently every Friday, but there's about 53 episodes that are already on my Instagram if anybody wanted to check those out. But those have been like so fun to do and to have. I think in the course of having those conversations is when I realized like, wow, this is like I do like talking about the spirituality aspect. Like I felt like that was kind of overshadowing like the art concept a little bit,
Mm.
but I mean, not overshadowing, but I just realized how important that was and how closely tied that is with like my own practice. So, it's fun though. I like having those conversations. I know we had ours and your beautiful work, and that was so rare to me to find, um, like a non-femme. Am I saying that right? Like to see a man doing the work that you create. I don't really see it very often.
I was talking with a friend recently we vibe on that level similarly.
Mhm.
And he was saying, yeah, just the soft masculine. I'm like,
Okay.
oh, I love that idea.
Okay, I
Yeah.
like that too.
Because I like it too, because ideas around like rematriation
Mhm.
will have to involve the participation of everybody. And
Yes.
and I think the soft masculine is part of that, like
Mhm.
giving way in a graceful way. And also, like, as
Yes.
someone who a gender nonconforming, like queer,
Mhm.
the femininity has always like embraced me
Yeah,
in a way that's, distinct from people who are living their life as women, but it's still there and it's fluid and it's something that I've
totally.
always valued.
You'll probably really enjoy the piece that's in the show. It's a video, and it's kind of, it's created by an artist named Joshua, and they're two-spirit artists, and it's, a play not a play, but like about there's the legend of Dear Woman, and who is this in Native American stories, she's very benevolent to women, children, and men who treat women and children with respect. But if you're not in that category, like, she will take care of you. And so the video, the concept is it's kind of like a 5-minute loop, but the visuals are beautiful. Two-spirit artists with just dancing, music. It's really cool. It's really cool. And it taps into sacred sexuality, also those breaking those gender norms that we have like, some people are clinging to like for dear life. But it's like, no, like it's okay to be open. It's okay to be accepting. Um, Gosh, yeah, so the piece is really beautiful, and it's the first time that they will have a video, piece in the community gallery downstairs. So I was really proud of that and
Nice.
really proud of the artist too because they're my sibling.
Mm,
And I just thought that the piece was just so visually beautiful. So yeah, check it out for sure.
right on. I'm
Yeah.
definitely gonna check it out.
And you're saying like the soft masculine and they're two spirits. So I don't know if they would necessarily say soft masculine, but I love that term.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's very like evocative
Yes.
and appropriate for a lot of soft masculine people in my life too. I'm like
Yes.
that. Like,
I mean, I go to great lengths to surround myself with soft masculine because, the other we all know what that is like and yeah.
well, things are changing thanks to people like you. So I appreciate it, and that you're involving these 18 artists in the show.
Mhm.
I'm about to go see it myself, and another reminder to anyone watching that it's going on through February 18th. So be sure to check it out. The Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art and Culture in beautiful downtown Riverside. And we have been coming at you from the beautiful main library in downtown Riverside, where Denise also has a mural displayed on the outside. So come check that out.
Yes.
And Denise, thanks so much for being here today.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was fun. Thank you.
So follow Denise at Paramama on Instagram and follow us at Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance. See you next time.